The sky had been clear when Isabella Hart woke on the morning of her wedding. By mid-afternoon, storm clouds had gathered as if the universe itself was mourning what should have been the happiest day of her life. The guests whispered as the rain began to fall. Inside the chapel, orchids drooped under the weight of sudden humidity. The harpist, confused, played the prelude for a second time. And then, a third. Isabella stood at the altar, clutching her bouquet with trembling hands, her heart pounding beneath the layers of delicate white lace. Every second stretched like hours. Her maid of honor whispered behind her, "Maybe he got stuck in traffic." But Julian Cross had always been punctual, obsessively so. A hush fell across the pews as the best man entered. Alone. No groom. He handed the priest a note. The priest opened it, turned pale, and handed it to Isabella without a word. There was no message. Just a blank piece of paper, soaked and smudged at the corners. Julian hadn't written a goodbye. He had vanished. The rain began to pour. 10 years later, Isabella Hart stood at the front of a well-lit office in coastal Fairhaven, speaking to a room full of aspiring therapists. Calm, composed. Her smile practiced but warm. "Sometimes, the greatest trauma is the silence left behind," she said, referring to abandonment in clinical terms. "What we don't say can echo louder than any spoken word." They scribbled notes. She swallowed hard. Outside the tall windows, the weather was once again perfect. Spring sunlight spilled over the sea. Fairhaven was safe, unassuming, a place where people didn't ask too many questions, just how Isabella liked it. After class, she walked across the manicured campus, her heels clicking in rhythm. She stopped to wave at her fiancé, Dr. Nathaniel Gray, a soft-spoken neurologist with quiet eyes and steady hands. He waited beside his car with a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. "Another standing ovation, Professor Hart?" he teased, something like that. They kissed briefly. He handed her the flowers, and she smiled, but there was always a part of her that flinched when someone gave her yellow. Sunflowers had been in her wedding bouquet. "Dinner with Sophie tonight?" he asked. "Yes, and yes, she's still mad at me for not letting her dye her hair black." "Again," he chuckled. "Ah, teenage rebellion. A rite of passage." She nodded, but inwardly, her heart ached. Sophie was bright, intuitive, stubborn, everything Julian had been. But Isabella had buried that thought long ago. Or tried to. That night she found Sophie at the kitchen table, doodling storm clouds and broken hearts in the margins of her homework. "Want help with algebra?" Isabella offered gently. "No offense, Mom, but you're more of a trauma-bonding kind of expert." "Touché." Isabella laughed and ruffled her daughter's thick brown hair. "I'll order Thai?" Sophie nodded. "Extra tofu." As Isabella turned to grab her phone, the doorbell rang. She frowned. It was late for a delivery. Sophie raised an eyebrow. Isabella opened the door and felt her body go cold. There he stood, Julian Cross, soaked from the rain, just like the day he left. Older, thinner, haunted. His eyes locked onto hers like a man seeing color for the first time. "Isabella." Her hand clutched the doorframe to stay upright. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her entire body recoiled as if memory had become flesh and stepped through her front door. Julian's eyes flicked past her, to Sophie, standing curiously in the hallway behind. His lips parted. "She looks just like..." Isabella slammed the door in his face. An hour later, after putting a confused Sophie to bed and calling Nathaniel, who insisted he would come over immediately, Isabella stood alone in the kitchen, pacing. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think. The memory of Julian's face, so familiar and yet so foreign, rattled her to her bones. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I was told if I married you, you'd die." She stared at the screen. Then another message. We need to talk. Not about us. About your daughter. Isabella's heart stopped. She stared up the stairs where Sophie slept, safe, oblivious, and hers. And in that moment, something terrifying struck her. Julian had looked at Sophie not with shock, but with recognition. And that meant, no, it wasn't possible. Was it? That night, the rain returned. Not a storm. Just a soft, steady drizzle, like the past tapping gently on the windows, whispering that it had never truly left. Isabella hadn't slept. She sat at the edge of her bed, the light of dawn filtering through gauzy curtains, casting long shadows on the floor. Her phone still rested in her lap, Julian's message frozen on the screen like a ghost refusing to leave. We need to talk. Not about us. About your daughter. Each word gnawed at her like teeth. Sophie's daughterhood had never been in question. She was born 6 months after the wedding, that wasn't. And Nathaniel, whom Isabella met during her darkest spiral, had stepped in without question. They'd married quickly, quietly, and he'd raised Sophie as his own. But now, everything felt like glass on the verge of shattering. A knock startled her. She opened the door and found Julian standing there, again soaked, this time from sea mist, not rain. He looked like he hadn't slept in years, sunken cheeks, eyes rimmed with red. But it was the look in those eyes, pleading, haunted, that undid her resolve. I don't want to talk here, she said flatly. Too many ears. Follow me. She drove them to the cliffs outside Fairhaven, where the lighthouse stood abandoned and wind-beaten. As they stood beneath its crumbling frame, Julian took in a breath, as if surfacing from deep water. I know how this looks, he began. You left me standing in front of 100 people, Julian, Isabella snapped. There's no other way for it to look. I buried you. I rebuilt my life. And you come back saying, what? That I would have been murdered if we'd said, I do? His jaw tensed. Yes. Silence. Only the wind and the waves below. He reached into his coat and handed her something, a letter, aged, yellowed, sealed with a crimson wax insignia, a symbol she didn't recognize, an eye inside a triangle surrounded by thorns. That arrived the night before our wedding, Julian said, delivered by a man I'd never seen before. He knew everything about you, your childhood, your allergies, your blood type. Isabella blinked, chilled. The letter said, if I married you, you'd die. That my family had already approved your termination as a liability. That the only way to keep you alive was to disappear. So I did, she scoffed. So noble. How convenient you didn't warn me. They warned me not to, said they'd make it look like suicide. Or an accident, I believed them, and I was right to. Why now? She snapped. Why show up after 10 years? Because they're watching again, he said. Not you. Sophie. The name hit her like a whip. Julian stepped closer. She's mine, isn't she? Isabella didn't answer. I did the math, Isa, and when I saw her face, God, she looks just like my sister when she was 14. I know what they want. They see her as the next generation. I had to come back. I had to warn you. She looked away, breath trembling. I didn't know, she said, softly. I didn't know she was yours. I didn't let myself do the math. I couldn't. Julian's voice dropped. They've already tried to make contact with her. Probably subtle. Dreams. Whispered messages. A recruiter will follow soon. They always do. The bloodline. Mine. Yours. It's what they want. That's what the society feeds on. Legacy. She shook her head, furious. What even is this society? You're talking in riddles. Cults and threats and bloodlines. It's real, he interrupted. They call themselves the Dominion. Founded before the Great Fire of London, they control governments, companies, even entire conflicts. Every crossman is sworn to them by blood oath. My father sits on the high circle. I refused the oath, and they punished me. Not by killing me, but by taking you, she paced, mind spinning. And what now? They'll just, what? Come for Sophie? And you thought showing up would help? They already are. Do you think it's a coincidence she's suddenly drawn to fire? That she dreams in languages she's never learned? That she instinctively senses people's guilt? Isabella froze. Sophie had confessed last week that a classmate had felt wrong. Hours later, the boy was arrested for stealing from the school's fundraiser, caught on tape. Sophie claimed she just knew. And what exactly do you expect me to do? Isabella whispered. Julian looked at her with desperate eyes. Let me help you protect her. Let me make up for what I failed to do 10 years ago. The society wants her, but we don't have to let them take her. I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't either, he admitted. But I do know one thing. Sophie has power, and they're coming to claim it. That night, Isabella returned home to find Sophie asleep on the couch, homework open beside her, and a strange charcoal sketch crumpled beneath her hand. Isabella eased it out without waking her. It was a drawing of a woman, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut, standing in front of a symbol, an eye in a triangle, surrounded by thorns. Her blood ran cold. She turned over the paper. On the back, Sophie had written one word: "They're watching." The sterile white walls of the lab felt colder than usual. Isabella sat beside Sophie, watching her as the nurse drew a small vial of blood. The technician had been hesitant to explain why her doctor requested paternity testing, but Isabella had insisted. She needed to know the truth, even if it shattered everything. Is this really necessary? Sophie asked quietly, her eyes wide and vulnerable. Isabella forced a smile, trying to mask the storm inside. Sometimes, to protect ourselves, we need to face the hardest truths. As Sophie was wheeled out, Isabella's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. It was from Julian. There's more. Your fiancé isn't who he seems. Watch him. The blood test results arrived faster than expected. Nathaniel sat across the kitchen table, his usual calm replaced with an unsettling edge as Isabella placed the folder between them. Sophie's not your daughter, Isabella said, voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel's eyes flickered with something unreadable. How could you? She asked, hurt and disbelief colliding. I never wanted you to find out like this, he replied, voice low. But you don't know the half of it. The next days spiraled into a maze of suspicion. Nathaniel's phone was suddenly locked tight, his late-night absences unexplained. He claimed exhaustion, work emergencies, but Isabella's therapist instincts screamed danger. Meanwhile, Sophie's behavior became stranger. She started talking about dreams, visions of shadowed figures, of voices calling her name. Once calm and grounded, Sophie now seemed to teeter on the edge between this world and something else. One evening, as Isabella reviewed old photographs, something caught her eye, a faint mark on Sophie's wrist, almost invisible beneath a bracelet, a symbol. The same triangle with an eye she had seen in Julian's letter, and in Sophie's charcoal sketch. Her mind raced back to Julian's warnings. The society wasn't just a vague threat. They had already left their mark. Isabella confronted Sophie gently. Sweetheart, have you noticed anything unusual? People watching? Feeling like you don't belong? Sophie nodded slowly. It's like I'm different, like I have things inside me I don't understand. Sometimes I feel pulled. Isabella's heart clenched. How could she protect her daughter when the danger came from within her very blood? That night, she confronted Nathaniel. Who are you really? She demanded. He looked away, defeated. I'm part of something, he confessed. A group that keeps the society's influence in check. Isabella felt the ground shift beneath her. You lied to me. Not everything, he said. I came to love you, both of you. But my loyalty was never just to you. It was to a mission, to watch Sophie. Watch? Or control? His silence was answer enough. Desperate for clarity, Isabella dug through her mother's old belongings, unearthing letters and diaries, revealing her mother's own secret past with the society. It became clear Isabella had been groomed to join them, unknowingly carrying the bloodline that Sophie now inherited. Her life, her love, was a lie woven into a tapestry of power, manipulation, and secrets. As she closed the dusty journal, her phone lit up again. A final message from Julian. "They're closer than you think, and Sophie's power is awakening. Be ready." Isabella stared out the window into the night. The shadows were closing in. The morning fog clung thick to the coastal town of Fairhaven as Isabella made her way through the forest path behind her childhood home. In her hands, a rusted tin box she had unearthed from beneath a loose floorboard in the attic, hidden away in her late mother's armoire behind a false panel. Inside were journals, letters, maps, newspaper clippings, some blacked out with ink, others with symbols and names scrawled in the margins, all pointing to a past her mother had buried and one Isabella had never dared to dig up. She spread the documents out on an old picnic table in the clearing, her eyes darting across the pages. The symbol again, the eye, the triangle, the thorns, etched into her mother's stationery, branded into the leather of a small, red-bound book titled The Codex of Dominion. This wasn't just about Julian's family. The society had touched hers too. Her mother, Isabella Hart, had written of the Circle, a smaller inner sanctum within the society that selected bloodlines for their gifts. Those gifts, she wrote, were not metaphorical. There were real abilities, intuition sharpened to premonition, perception bordering on telepathy, and the ability to influence thought through mere presence. Isabella's hands trembled as she read the journal's final entry. "They think I'm dead, but my time is simply running out. I faked the cancer diagnosis to disappear. But I see now. I was never meant to escape. Isabella must never know who she is. If she does, they'll come for her. And through her, Sophie." Her mother hadn't died of cancer. She had run. And failed. Isabella's phone buzzed, a text from Julian. "They used your mother. She resisted. They erased her." The realization hit Isabella like a wave. Her mother's so-called mental breakdown, her erratic behavior, the sudden move to Fairhaven. It wasn't illness, it was escape. Her mother had tried to protect her, just as Julian had tried to protect her by disappearing. But now it was Sophie who needed protection. Sophie, who had begun hearing whispers through walls, knowing when people were lying. Who had walked out of a locked classroom without touching the door. Who had stopped a school fight by simply looking at the aggressor, who then burst into tears, unable to explain why. Julian was right. Sophie's power was awakening. And the society was circling. That night, Julian arrived in secret, cloaked beneath a hooded coat. They met again at the lighthouse, where truth had first been dropped like a live wire between them. He placed a stack of files on the ground between them. Photographs, dossiers, classified documents stolen from the society's own archives. "This," he said, "is what they are." The society, he explained, operated under layers of fronts: humanitarian organizations, think tanks, multinational foundations. Its members included world leaders, CEOs, and media moguls. They engineered elections, started and ended wars, owned the algorithms that shaped public thought. "Dominion isn't a cult," Julian said. "It's an empire. And Sophie, she's a candidate for the next generation of leadership. They call it the Ascension." "What does that mean?" Isabella asked, breath tight. "It means they want to train her, break her, rebuild her into someone who thinks like them, a future queen in a world run by shadows." Isabella's knees buckled. "My mother? Was she part of it?" Julian nodded. Isabella Hart was one of their stars. She was recruited young, then defected. But defectors are rare, and they never leave quietly. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. "So all this time, I've been walking through a story, Someone else wrote for me." Julian reached for her hand. "You can rewrite it, but you need to know one more thing." He opened a small case. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, set with a red stone. Isabella recoiled. "I've seen that before," she whispered. "My mother wore that." "It's a sigil ring," Julian said. "One of only 7 ever made. It marks you as a legacy within the society's founding bloodlines. That's why they want Sophie. Because of you." Isabella stared at it in horror. "I never wore it," she said. "My mother gave it to me on my 16th birthday. I locked it away. I thought it was just a strange antique." "It's a key," Julian said softly. "Not just symbolic. That ring grants access to their central archive, the vault. It's buried beneath the society's estate, where everything is stored: names, projects, leverage over the world. And if I go there, you could destroy them, or they could destroy you." In that moment, Isabella realized the war wasn't coming. It had already begun. And the front lines ran straight through her blood. Isabella had always prided herself on seeing people clearly. Years of training as a therapist taught her to read body language, detect microexpressions, interpret silences. But now, as she sat across from Nathaniel Gray, the man she had agreed to marry, she felt like a fool in her own home. He was sitting at the edge of their bed, buttoning his shirt with methodical calm, as though the world hadn't just flipped upside down. "You were assigned to me," Isabella said, holding out the photo she'd found tucked in Julian's file, the same one now splayed on her kitchen counter, a surveillance shot. Nathaniel, watching her from across the street, time-stamped 2 months before they ever met. Nathaniel didn't deny it. "Yes," he said. "At first." Isabella's stomach twisted. "At first?" He stood slowly, his eyes flickering with something that could have been guilt or calculation. "I was sent to monitor you. Assess if you still carried the potential the society feared your mother passed down. I wasn't told about Sophie, not right away, but once I saw her," he paused. "I knew she was special. They confirmed it later, that she's what they call a convergent heir, a genetic event, the perfect combination. And you were going to mold her?" Isabella's voice cracked with disgust. "I was supposed to, yes." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "But you proposed to me. I fell in love with you. You used me." He stepped closer, voice low. "I don't blame you for thinking that. But it's more complicated. They never expected me to care. That's why they're watching me now, too. Because I deviated." Isabella stared at him, breath frozen in her chest. "So, this entire engagement, our life, it's been a job to you? A cover?" "No, not for a long time now. At first, yes, I followed orders. I sent reports. But then I stopped. Quietly, I tried to break away." "You live in our home?" she said, her voice rising. "You tucked Sophie in at night. You helped name her school. You cried when she got sick. Was all of that staged?" "No," he snapped, then softened. "I would die for her." A silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Isabella turned away, but Nathaniel continued. "They know Julian is back. They know the truth about Sophie is out. That wasn't supposed to happen. Julian's return has accelerated their timeline." She spun to face him again. "Timeline for what?" "To bring her in. Officially, they'll offer her everything. Resources, power, prestige. They won't force her. Not yet. But if she refuses..." A chill swept through her. "They'll manipulate her. Or worse." Nathaniel nodded grimly. "There's more," he said. "Your mother didn't just defect. She left with something the society considered sacred. Something they called the Axis Doctrine. A philosophy, or perhaps an artifact. We never figured out what it was, but they believed your mother passed it to you. Or hid it inside you, through knowledge, blood, or both." "You're saying I might be carrying a secret I don't even know I have?" "Yes. And if they can't retrieve it, they'll try to extract it another way." Her stomach churned. That's why they want Sophie. If I don't unlock it, maybe she can. He nodded again. It's why they placed me with you. To locate the access and secure your loyalty or your compliance. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Isabella moved cautiously to the foyer. On the doormat, a single jet-black envelope. No return address, no stamp. Just the society symbol embossed in wax. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a card with gold foil lettering. The time has come. The bloodline must choose. Sophie is welcome at the estate. Sunset, the 7th day. Bring only the ring. Isabella looked up at Nathaniel. They're summoning her. He stepped forward. Then we have 6 days to decide what kind of woman she becomes. But Sophie is still a child. She's 15. They don't see children. They see assets. Tears burned behind her eyes. You said you love her, then help me stop them. I will. But you need to know something else, he said, pulling a small velvet pouch from his coat pocket. This was left at my doorstep last week. I didn't know what it meant, until now. He dropped the pouch onto the counter. Isabella opened it and poured the contents into her hand. A locket, small and gold. Inside was a photograph of a newborn baby and 2 names, Sophie Hart. And underneath it, in unfamiliar handwriting, subject 2 of 3. Isabella blinked, heart pounding. 3? Nathaniel stared at her. Julian may not have told you everything. Sophie might not be his only child. The storm rolled in just after midnight, black clouds swirling above Fairhaven like a warning. Thunder cracked across the sky as Sophie Hart stood barefoot in the hallway, staring out the rain-smeared window of her mother's house. But she wasn't watching the weather. She was watching the figure standing across the street. They had come every night that week, always at dusk, always wearing the same long coat. No face, no sound, just presence. She hadn't told her mother. Not yet. Because a secret had begun to bloom in Sophie, hot and quiet like a coal buried under ash. Ever since Julian appeared, this strange man she barely remembered, claiming to be her father, something had changed. Her senses had sharpened. She could hear people's thoughts in pieces, feel emotions brush against her skin like static. She had known that Nathaniel was lying before he ever said a word. She had felt it in his pulse. And she knew the person across the street was not here to hurt her. Not yet. They were waiting for her choice. The next morning, a note appeared in her locker at school. No name, no signature. Just a line in looping script. Fire obeys you. Why keep it caged? That afternoon, she skipped class. In the old boathouse by the cliffs, her secret sanctuary, Sophie did something she hadn't dared before. She focused, palms trembling, and willed the old oil lantern to light. No matches, no spark, just thought. The flame flared to life. Bright, controlled, obedient. She laughed, then screamed when it responded to her scream and roared higher. She dropped the lantern and backed away, terrified of herself. That night she finally asked Julian to explain. They sat in the garden behind Isabella's house, cloaked in shadows. I felt it, she said. Something inside me. Like I can bend things, influence people. You can, Julian said. Your mother was born of a gifted line. I come from one too. They paired us, without our knowledge, for this reason. Paired us? Sophie echoed. He nodded. It's called selective legacy initiation. The society's founders believed power can be designed through bloodlines. They track genealogy, traits, anomalies, then bring together the right people, sometimes by force. So, I'm a lab rat? She asked bitterly. You're their masterpiece, Julian replied, his voice filled with dread. Sophie swallowed hard. The locket. It said I'm the second of 3. Julian looked away. There were others, one raised by the society, one hidden. You were the variable. I'm not anyone's variable, she snapped. I make my own decisions. Julian smiled faintly. That's what scares them most. The next evening, the figure from the street revealed herself. A woman in her 20s, striking, with platinum hair and eyes too pale to be natural. She introduced herself only as Cirrus. You've inherited more than you know, she told Sophie during their first secret meeting at the marina. You were born of a war, but you don't have to fight it. You can lead it. Lead what? Sophie asked. The new world. A world shaped not by the blind, but by the gifted. We can give you a seat. Power, protection, truth. Cirrus handed her a small case. Inside, an obsidian pendant etched with the society's sigil and Sophie's initials. Wear it when you're ready, she said. The others already have. Others? Sophie whispered. Cirrus only smiled. Your siblings. That night, Isabella found Sophie burning her journal. You don't understand, Sophie snapped as Isabella pleaded with her. You've lied to me my whole life. I was protecting you, Isabella said. From what? From who I really am? From power? From truth? Isabella tried to calm her. They want to use you. You're not their heir, Sophie. You're my daughter. No, I'm their daughter, Sophie whispered coldly. And maybe that's who I'm meant to be. She stormed out. The next day, she was gone. The pendant was missing. So was the ring Isabella had hidden in a locked box. Cecilia's ring. The sigil ring. Sophie had found it. Julian was furious. She's gone to them. Isabella blamed herself, but the worst came in the mail. A USB drive. Footage played. Sophie standing in the society's ancestral chamber, a vast cathedral-like room. Hooded figures surrounding her, a voice intoning, daughter of flame, born of shadow, bearer of bloodlines, do you accept your inheritance? Sophie's voice, steady, cold. I do. But just as the screen faded to black, a final image flickered into view, a moment no one was meant to see, Cirrus whispering in Sophie's ear. And Sophie's reply, I'll play their game. For now. Julian collapsed at dawn. It happened in Isabella's living room, just as she was pacing in her robe, sleepless and haunted by Sophie's disappearance. One moment he was standing, reaching out as if to stop her from leaving the room, and the next he was on the floor, convulsing. His skin went ashen, his breath ragged. Blood pooled beneath his fingernails. Isabella screamed for Nathaniel, who came running from the guest room, his makeshift exile after their confrontation. Together, they lifted Julian onto the couch. He mumbled through cracked lips. They're closing in. They know what I've done. Nathaniel checked his vitals, face grim. He's burning from the inside. This isn't just illness. It's engineered. Isabella turned on him, eyes blazing. What do you mean engineered? Nathaniel hesitated. The society developed internal silencing protocols, microbial agents, disguised as terminal conditions, injected into defectors who've gone too far. It presents like illness, but it's not. It's punishment. Isabella's stomach turned to ice. You're saying they poisoned him. I'm saying he was allowed to return, Nathaniel said, and they knew he'd run straight to you. This was theater. Julian stirred. I faked it first. To gain your trust. To draw them out. But they knew. They turned my lie into truth. You're dying? She asked, crouching beside him, hands trembling. I don't know anymore, Julian whispered. They may have made it real. But something inside Isabella refused to accept it. Julian had lied before, masterfully, convincingly. And now the timing, the drama of his collapse. It felt too staged. That night, As Julian slept under sedation, Isabella did what she hadn't dared to in years. She accessed her mother's encrypted medical files. Isabella Hart had left behind volumes of coded journals, and Isabella had never unlocked all of them. But one, hidden inside an antique jewelry box sealed with wax, cracked open with the ring Sophie had stolen, now returned in a velvet pouch by a courier who refused to give a name. Inside the file, patient records, medical scans, blood analyses, not of Cecilia, but of Julian, dated 2 weeks before his return, labeled Subject Code Orion R, Status Physically Viable, No Signs of Terminal Degeneration, Rejection Protocol Not Initiated. Julian had not been dying. Not then, perhaps not even now. She confronted him at sunrise. "You lied about dying," Isabella said, standing over his bed. Julian opened his eyes. No denial, just pain. At first, yes. Why? Because it was the only way to bring you back into the truth. To make you see. I knew if I just returned you wouldn't listen. But if you thought I was dying, if Sophie was in danger, you'd act. You manipulated me, she said, voice breaking. I protected you, he rasped. And now, I'm paying for the lie. But there's more, she said, voice tight with realization. Your story. The society. You told me everything, except why now? Why return after 10 years, when you've known where we were for at least 5? Julian sat up slowly, spine trembling. Because Sophie wasn't the only one they made, he said. There's a brother, raised inside the society, born from a different union. I didn't know until recently, but he's real. And he's dangerous. Isabella froze. You had another child. I was forced to. After I left you, they used me. Chose a breeder, as they called her, another gifted heir. He's 17 now. And they call him the Ascendant. A name surfaced in Isabella's mind like a shipwreck. Subject 3. She whispered it aloud. They're going to pit them against each other, Julian said. A test. Only one will inherit the seat of command. The other will be absorbed. Isabella's heart shattered. They're going to make my daughter fight for survival, against her own blood. Julian reached for her hand. We can still stop them. But there's something you need to know. Your mother, she didn't just defect. She created a failsafe, a mechanism that could bring the society's entire bloodline database down. Every candidate, every experiment erased from their control. Where is it? Isabella asked. In you, he said. Hidden in your neural memory. Coded words she implanted before she died. A sequence of phrases. Triggers. She used guided hypnosis. You buried them to protect yourself. Isabella shook her head. That's impossible. It's not, Nathaniel said quietly from the doorway. It's how they pass legacy knowledge. Genetic memory. But accessed through trance states. Julian met her eyes. They think only Sophie holds the key. But it's you. It always was. And then he said the first phrase. The lily bends before the storm. Isabella flinched. A memory not her own rose up. Her mother's voice, soft, distant. When the lily bends, child, what do we do? Julian prompted her. She answered without thinking. We close the garden. Julian smiled faintly. It's starting to come back. Tears rolled down Isabella's cheeks. What do I do now? We break in, Julian said. To the estate. On the 7th day, while they host the ceremony. And Sophie? She'll be center stage. But we'll turn the lights, Isabella whispered. Then we burn the stage. The moon rose full over the society's hidden estate, a sprawling fortress tucked deep within the Blue Ridge Mountains. To the outside world, it was a historical preserve. To insiders, it was the ancestral throne of a centuries-old dynasty built on manipulation, selective breeding, and blood-bound power. Tonight, it would host the Ascension Rite, a once-in-a-generation ceremony where heirs were chosen, oaths taken, and control cemented. Inside, Sophie stood at the center of a vast chamber lit only by torches. Her hair was braided in the society's ceremonial pattern. Around her, hooded figures knelt in a circle, murmuring in Latin. At her side stood Cirrus, her strange and elegant recruiter, and across from her him, the other heir. A boy her age with Julian's cheekbones and silver eyes so pale they seemed to glow. He said nothing, but his gaze locked with hers like a mirror held up to her darkest self. "He has no name," Cirrus whispered. "Only a title. The Ascendant." "Who is he really?" Sophie asked. "Your brother, but not your equal." The circle rose in unison. A voice echoed from the front of the chamber. The Chancellor, an ageless man in crimson robes. "Let the test begin." But before the first blade was drawn, the lights failed. Not dimmed. Died. Every torch flickered out at once, as if a breath had sucked the flame from the air. And when the darkness lifted, Isabella was standing in the center of the chamber beside Julian and Nathaniel, all three cloaked and armed. Gasps rippled through the circle. "Stop the ceremony," the Chancellor barked. "No," Isabella said. "This ends tonight." She turned to Sophie. "I know you're scared. I know you feel alone. But you are not their weapon." Julian stepped forward. "She's more than a vessel." "She's the key to ending this madness." Cirrus sneered. "You brought weapons into the temple? We brought truth." Nathaniel replied, tossing a black flash drive at the Chancellor's feet. "Your bloodline archives, the full database. Every lie, every experiment, every betrayal, backed up and copied across 4 secure locations." "You wouldn't dare leak it," the Chancellor said. "Oh, I would," Isabella said, smiling coldly. "And I will." The Chancellor motioned for the guards. Before they reached her, Isabella spoke the final phrase her mother had hidden in her subconscious. "When the fire takes root, the garden must burn." A loud hum shook the chamber. The floor beneath the altar cracked open, revealing a dormant mechanism, an ancient fail-safe Cecilia had embedded decades before. Julian looked to Isabella. "Now!" She pressed her hand to the sigil embedded in the floor, and the chamber screamed. Holograms burst to life in the air, images of tortured children, stolen DNA, coerced breeding rituals, the society's secrets laid bare in 360 degrees. The congregation stumbled back in horror. Sophie looked around in shock, betrayal etched across her face. "This is what they really are?" "They lied to all of us," Isabella said gently. "But you get to choose who you'll be." The Ascendant stepped forward. "They told me she'd fail, that she'd run, but she stayed." He knelt before Sophie. "You are the real heir." Gasps filled the air. Cirrus drew a dagger. She was never meant to lead. But Nathaniel tackled her before she could strike, pinning her to the floor. "It's over." The Chancellor, desperate, activated a fail-safe, a pulse meant to fry the implanted memories in all legacy heirs. But it backfired. Julian had reprogrammed it. Instead, it triggered a data dump, leaking all society intel directly to a dozen press outlets. The secret world was exposed. As the society fell into chaos, Sophie looked at Julian, then Isabella, and she spoke. "I choose my own path." She turned to the congregation. "You built this on lies, on control. I won't be your puppet, and I won't lead what needs to die." With a motion of her hand, she lit the altar aflame. It burned fast and furious, cleansing, hungry. Sophie walked through the smoke, untouched by the fire. Julian followed, but staggered. Outside, As helicopters circled overhead and media vans approached the hidden estate, he fell to his knees. "I lied again," he confessed, breath labored. "I am dying now." They made sure of it. Isabella cradled him. "You still came back. For you. For her. For them all." And then he was gone. But in his jacket pocket was a final envelope. Inside, a birth certificate. Another child. Born in Paris. Mother unknown. Gender redacted. But the last name, Cross. Sophie looked up from it. "I'm not the end," she said. "I'm the beginning." And with the world watching, she stepped into the spotlight, not as a chosen heir, but as the girl who broke the chain,